So in this book, there's this model called the 9 pains model, and I'm going to be showing or talking about a core distinction from the model today. So hopefully you will find it impactful. And I don't have to make the case for complexity. Maud mentioned that the book has an overlay, the Present Space Leadership Book of Complexity. I was looking at the Facebook post of this group, and many are talking about that, just the complex times, the fast-moving times we're living in. So this book addresses that in some way, and we'll be talking about through the model, through this piece of the model. I'm going to share a very small piece, how that can address what we're working with and dealing with these days around complexity. So of course, the importance of presence is central to our work. So presence, Doug defines this in his book, Present Space Leadership. Presence is an internal state, the awareness of immediacy, stillness, inclusive awareness, and possibility. So we describe presence as a meta-competency. It's a competency that underpins every other competency that we work with. It becomes deeply woven. Our ability to hold presence and to be in the present moment becomes deeply woven in the fabric of who we are. And it enables all other competencies. It's a way of being as well as a way of doing. And so that's a part of the stream of our work, the being and the doing. Both are important and reinforce each other and support each other. So of course, for leaders, we coach leaders and the coaches that coach them. Awareness and presence enable us to be with and embody what we care about in a clear, grounded, resourceful way, no matter what's going on around us in our complex family, in our complex teams, in our complex times. Presence allows us to work in the moment with what's going on in the context and also the people that we interact or lead. Presence also allows us to be more aware internally of what's happening for us, our own experience, and so that we can manage and observe our internal state more skillfully in service of our commitments, to ourselves, to our families, at our workplace, and in the world. So presence allows us to wake up, that moment of waking up, to make a different choice, to make a more optimal choice in the moment, rather than what our habits would have us choose, so that we can align with what really matters to us. So I can't resist. I'm going to share my screen here, and I'm going to show you one of our core graphics. And this is it. So this is how we, it's a graphic that depicts how we hold what we call habit nature. So it's sort of a PBC, PBL signature. And it's the bell jar. So you can see that our habits are embodied. And you know this, of course, from what you've heard so far, and maybe you already know this in your work, that our habits are not up here, they are totally embodied in the very cells of our nervous system and in our bodies. And so some of these words help us just grok that. So we have interpretations, how we see the world, information we let in and don't let in, emotions, the filtering we have from our conditioning, from our history that has shaped us to who we are today, our narratives, the internal stories that we tell ourselves about what's so, what's possible, and who we are in the world. And then the somatic shape, most importantly, how we shape ourselves in the world, how we interact with the world. So this is just a quick graphic, which I love, the bell jar of how we embody our habits. The next picture shows another, well, hopefully, there we go, another move that we all make in adult development, in our own development, and coaches help leaders make, and leaders need to make, which is what we call this witness wake up move, which allows us to shift. So we're lifting our own bell jar. So it's the subject-object move in adult development. It's when we move what we are subject to as object, and we can hold it outside ourselves. And this is what we're going to be doing as I talk about this model from the 9 pains model from the Present Space Leadership book. It's a way that we are going to wake up. We're going to actually shift and be able to see things about our experience on several levels that we may not have seen before. And this is the move of development. This is the way that we shift our perspectives, the way that we have more choice, the way we open to something that we haven't actually considered before, to see as a course of action that is new to us. And this is what adult development and human change is all about. And of course, we support that. This is also, of course, in line with neuroplastic change. This is what we're doing. We're rewiring our brain as we see new things and practice new moves. I just want to bring that in. So let's do an experience together, a centering practice. And I want to say that the thing I'm going to be talking about, the part of the model I'm going to be talking about is context, identity, and soma. That's sort of the theme for today. Those three levels of scale or system: context, identity, and soma. So let's do a centering practice together. If you will, just put what you're holding down if you have a pen and are writing, and get comfortable in your chair. Maybe turn off, well, you don't want to turn off your computer screen. Never mind. Don't do that. So just take a moment to scan your environment. So just notice where you are, become present of where you are. You are in many different places on this beautiful planet. Those of you on this call and those that may be listening later, just notice what's in your environment. I'm in my home right now in Washington, D.C. And I notice outside the window, the leaves are still turning as it's turning into fall in this part of the world. So some of the things in your space, in your environment, probably inspire you. They touch you in some way. Other things in your environment probably nag at you and remind you of what you haven't done yet. That pile of files on your desk. So as you look out a window in your space, if you have one, you might remember that there's a bigger world out there. Of course, most of the world comes to us through our internet and our computers or our devices. But just take a look outside and notice that we are in a very big world. I also notice myself in a kind of bubble. My daughter, who is pregnant with our first grandchild, is coming for Thanksgiving. It's a big US holiday, 2 days from now. And that's a warm feeling for me about having time with family. It's a time of the year of gratitude for me. And notice too, there's a whole set of people out in your world that you interact with, some of whom might be wanting your time during this hour, and yet you've chosen to be here and not with them. You've chosen to spend time on your own development here. You may have said no to some other opportunities to be here in this moment. So there's a web of commitments that you live inside of that are to outside in your world, connections that you have in your world. And that's the bigger context. You have friends, you have colleagues, you have family who love you. So now close your eyes if you want, or just lower your gaze. And bring your attention into yourself, you as an individual. There's some reason, which you may be clearly aware of or not, why you're choosing to spend this hour with this group of people doing what we're doing here. You have chosen to be here. You have needs, you have commitments, and yet there's some sort of choice you made that this is what you would be attending to right now. Here you are, showing up in this community of learners. Many other people are on this call with you, and they're all curious about something just like you are. You're seeking something that will nourish and fulfill you in some way, you hope, or perhaps challenge you or give you something that you might imagine would be useful in your work or in your relationships. And then inside of that, sense your body itself, the weight of your body pressing down into the chair or the floor. Your breath moving in and out, the steady pulsing of your heart, energy streaming in your body. Maybe subtleness, maybe racing. Whatever's inside you, notice that. Make room for whatever emotional state or mood is present right now. Notice that. So here we are in this brief centering practice, and you can open your eyes when you're ready. So we began with our context, our environment, what was outside of ourselves. And then we brought our intention into ourselves as identity, as an individual. Then we moved inside of that even to our soma, to our body in its wholeness, the realms of sensation and emotion and cognition, as we attune to that information that's present and available to us all the time on each of those levels. So context, identity, and soma are all here right now. In fact, they're all here all the time as we start to pay attention to them. So I'm going to suggest right now that this set of distinctions, context, identity, and soma, can give us quite a radically new view of ourselves and the complex contexts that we're in, the complex world we are in. So I'm now going to share my screen again. And I'm going to go forward to the next graphic, which is from the book, The 9 Pains Leadership, the 9 Pains Model for the Present Space Leadership book. So you can see these constructs in a different kind of graphic. So context is the super system, mostly of many humans that we interact with, and also the bigger systems of economics and political and nation states and all of that, and organizations and bureaucracies and governments. So the context is the super system. The identity is the self system. It's who I take myself to be. It's the mask that I put on, my persona that I show to the world, that is impacted by the context, especially when I feel threatened. And then there's the soma, the subsystems of our psychobiology. So these are all the systems in our body, literally, all the systems that make up our body. And it's also our psychobiology. So not only our biology, but our psychology, the way we are conditioned, the way our habits are embodied and actually drive us toward certain behaviors, certain identities. In fact, the psychobiology, the subsystems of our soma actually produce our identity and are defending our identity. So these are what we call nested dynamism. Because they're different levels of system and scale, each bigger and then less big underneath and then less big underneath, they are all interacting all the time in a dynamic way. You can see hopefully from my story about that. So there's a constant dynamic interchange of energy and information between the systems. So as we tease these systems apart, as we actually begin to be aware of them through our inquiry and notice how each are interacting, we get more information. That gives us more information, which also offers more choice. So again, we're making these distinctions because all of these levels of system are available all the time. They're happening in our experience all the time. They're available and present for our observation and our intervention. So we are trained as leaders, as humans mostly, but as leaders and also as coaches, to look in the context, to look outside of us. What's happening out there? What can we do out there? How can we intervene in what's missing out there? What's the gap that we need to accomplish out there for the goals we need to make? What's not so practiced is really this identity piece and the soma piece. So really paying attention to how our individual identity might be threatened by the context, by the complexity in the world that we're facing right now. Maybe new territory. Also, soma, this whole conference is about embodiment and how that is an important piece of development and change. It's an important piece of who we are and our wholeness that often gets overlooked. So identity and soma are sort of new territories in leadership theory. And so this is an opening to an additional way of looking at what might be driving certain behaviors or certain actions in the context. So as we begin to see more of elements, we can see the context is actually made up of many people, the human systems. So as we see many people, actually we can also look at many identities with their own ideas of free will and what they want and their own ideas about what's possible and who they are in the world. And then we can see under that, there is a lot of nervous systems interacting together in a meeting. A lot of psychobiologies conditioned to produce and defend an identity and to produce and defend a context. Favorite inspiration from Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor. The last of the human freedoms to choose one's own attitude in any given set of circumstances. So that's what we're about. And may you continue to wake up and to remember presence and to be present in this moment as the only moment where change happens, and to be present in this moment and this moment. Thank you.